Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Make sure this microphone is where it needs to be. So, changing studios a little bit, changing things up. There's a lot of change in the air just in general. So, as much as we can intentionally go with that flow, probably the better. So, let me get out of studio mode here. So, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. Welcome to this new moon forecast. We're going to be looking at our new moon in Scorpio happening any time now. It is sunrise here on the East Coast of the United States, and surrounded by all my plant friends that I have to bring inside and sequester into a private room so my cats don't destroy them. So I decided to move my recording studio into this space as well. So I hope everyone is doing as well as they can. This is a very tumultuous time, as I'm sure many of us have already known and are experiencing. So let's just get right into it. So this forecast is going to be looking at the main astrological themes for the next 2 weeks, right? New moon to full moon, which will be on the 15th of November. We're going to look at the main transits between now and then. And if you are, in fact, a Scorpio rising, Scorpio moon, as I am, Scorpio moon or Scorpio sun, you stay tuned if you wish to the second part, because we will do the actual forecast for the Scorpio identified folks here in terms of the actual chart. But for now, we're going to do a general read for all signs and just kind of ground ourselves, maybe gather ourselves after this last lunar cycle that started with a solar eclipse. And we're in, even right now as I'm recording this, we're in the last moments of our balsamic moon phase. But I actually have the chart up for yesterday, the 31st, which is Halloween, and pointing out this cardinal T-square that we're looking at, if in fact you are looking at the chart. So one of the main things that's really coming to my attention about this upcoming new moon in Scorpio is the fact that the two ruling planets of the sign of Scorpio, Mars as more of the personalized individual ruler, and then Pluto as the transpersonal ruler of the sign of Scorpio, Mars being more of that desire and that drive to merge, to get deeper, to get closer, and Pluto, of course, being the agent of death and destruction, right, that precedes rebirth and transformation. Both of these planets in Western astrology rule the sign of Scorpio, and the fact that they're in this opposition to each other that is building right now, it will be exact on the 3rd of November, excuse me, is not lost on me, as I'm sure anybody who's paying attention to astrology, it's not lost on you either. So hopefully you can hear me. Sorry if it's kind of going in and out. So one moment, please. Okay, so the pause button is pretty remarkable, right? It's like no time has passed when I hit the pause button, even though I went and did something else. So, my friends, let's get into it. So, I did want to actually record this last night. My intention was originally to do a live stream because it's been a while, and as much as I love doing them, I don't really have the equipment to support consistent streaming. I just have this tiny little laptop right now, and it just isn't built for processing, as I've said many times, processing lots of large video files and streaming and whatnot. But I'll be honest, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, I definitely caught the feels over the last 2 days and continue to do so. Now, part of that, I think, on a personal note, is the fact that I am a moon in Scorpio. I have Venus in Scorpio. This new moon will be conjunct my natal Venus. It is not an easy placement for Venus and Scorpio, as we may have discovered when Venus was transiting Scorpio not that long ago. So, this forecast truly is dedicated to those of us who have caught the feel, regardless if you're a Scorpio person or not. Anybody who's caught the feels in the last couple of days, this forecast is dedicated to all of us. So I was not in a good headspace yesterday. I had to bring home work and finish it last night. So I just wasn't in a position to really record, and that's fine because now it's fresh. It's the morning, the sun is coming up, and we're about to have the new moon. And this seems like a much better time to be collecting my thoughts and sharing them with you about this upcoming new moon and just the lunar transit. So again, we're going to back up just a little bit and just remind ourselves here that the last lunar cycle that we just came out of started with an eclipse, right? And so I think there's some importance to acknowledge that the energies of the last lunar cycle, right? A new moon in Libra, right? That was this annular solar eclipse. The energy associated with that, even that full moon in Aries, which was much more present, it was very powerful. I felt a lot of engagement. There was a lot of just spark. There was a lot of creative intensity that came along with that Aries full moon. Uh, and as with all full moons, you kind of come to this culmination point, and then it is up to us to maintain the essence and the frequency of that culmination or illumination as the other side of the lunar cycle progresses, which is pulling away all of the extraneous things, right? Getting prepared for the end of the cycle. And it can be very difficult because it's not nearly as spontaneous, it's not nearly as reactionary as the first half of the lunar cycle is, where we're reacting and responding to things, and we're growing and we're discovering and we're learning, and we come to that culmination point, and then we have to kind of hold that light within ourselves as the light of the moon is waning and we are preparing to close out this cycle. And that's where we're at now, knowing that the energy that, whatever our intentions were set, knowing that they were much deeper at a soul level when we're talking about eclipses, and is going to take us through the next 6 months. And so sometimes that can be very confusing. It can be frustrating. You could feel like things are not happening. You can also feel just out of sorts because it doesn't seem like what it is that you've intended or wanted to grow and develop is really coming to fruition by the time we get to the end of this cycle. And I can empathize with that truly, and to just remember that those intentions, those seeds that were planted, are so much deeper than just the everyday personality that we're working with as we move through life. That is much deeper and more powerful experiences that are going to germinate and to grow and really just gestate in a lot of ways over the next 6 months. But now we're out of eclipse season. We are in this Scorpio time period. The sun is in Scorpio. The new moon will be in Scorpio, obviously. Mercury has been transiting Scorpio. And boy, oh boy, has it been very busy in Scorpio. So before we even got to this cardinal T-square, which we're going to talk about with Mars and Pluto in opposition, Mercury was in an opposition to Uranus not that long ago. You can see that even as of yesterday, it still hasn't come into its full trine with Neptune in Pisces, which is kind of a double-edged sword in some ways, right? Because it can really inspire a lot of creative and spiritual, especially with Mercury in Scorpio, a very deep understanding and a sense of real connection and a powerful talk about catching the feels, right? And we're talking about our everyday consciousness when we're talking about Mercury. So the other side of that, though, is the trine to Neptune can kind of lead you into a little bit more la land about your thoughts. You can kind of get caught up in the escapism of things, or just kind of float out to sea mentally, or just kind of get lost in all of it too. That's the other side of it. So it's now Neptune is in its retrograde still, and we're gonna, I think, the fog is still very much cleared away. It's a lot of willful ignorance at this point when Neptune is retrograde, and it can be very difficult to hold that space within yourself. And this Mercury trine Neptune, especially with it being retrograde, I think can certainly ease the flow of our creative and spiritual nature and expression, but it also can, like I said, it can also just, we want to cast ourselves out to sea. And there's a little bit of mental escapism that could possibly go along with it. The other side of that, though, is that it could really inspire us to go into deeper states of prayer, meditation, like really take the time to make that direct experiential connection to whatever you consider divine nature, right? Whether you call it God, whether you call it Great Spirit, whether you call it the universe, whatever it is for you, whatever that experience is. And Mercury trine Neptune, I think, could, and I would say my own experience certainly has led to a desire almost, and certainly a mental focus or a mental trajectory or a willingness to go deeper and to establish or maybe reestablish that connection to source through things like I said, meditation. Because with Mercury and Scorpio in particular, you're going into very deep realms. You're going into the subconscious. You're going into those dark corners mentally that you often don't do, knowing that you can kind of keep that separation in your own mind as you go into these spaces. And I do feel like that there is an opportunity to reestablish that connection with this trine to Neptune. So that's building right now as well. So but it's not an easy time. It's going to be less easy when Mercury comes into Sagittarius because it's at its detriment in Sagittarius. Mercury loves to play, right? Is that part of us that loves to play with ideas, let our mind just like wander or do a lot of mental work. And when it comes into Sag, it's about bringing it all together, right? Synthesizing and transmuting those ideas, and it's not a good placement for Mercury. So we'll talk about that when it gets closer to happening. And of course, Mercury in Scorpio is going to make connections to Pluto in this time period. It's going to very soon is going to make connections to Mars, which is finishing its transit in Cancer. Don't you worry, it's going to retrograde back into Cancer not long from now. And if you thought it was difficult now, as people are acting very directly and spontaneously and impulsively out of their feels, just wait until it's retrograde in Cancer. It's going to be even more difficult. But before that happens, Mars will come into Leo, and there will be a lot of very again impulsive and very strongly projected passions and creative expressions and just emotional the heart, right, is going to have the fullness of Mars projecting it out into the world, which on the surface sounds really great, and it is. But also too, the retrograde that's going to happen back into Cancer over the weeks is going to be really interesting. And if you are a person, especially with a Scorpio new moon, right? Because Mars is in fact a Scorpio ruling body, and Leo is fixed fire, right? So it's in a square to all the Scorpio energy to begin with, and Leo is very much about our own. We are the center of our own universe, right? And of course, the passions and the creativity and expression of our heart that comes through starts with Aries, right? The sense of subjective self, I am, and then finding an expression in the world. But it's very, with Mars in Leo, it can be very one-sided. It can be very conceited. It can be very, if you thought Mars in Cancer was selfish, oh my God. And then it's just going to come out, right? It's going to be expressed. And we're all going to be the center of our own universe for a little while when Mars is in Leo. And again, that's not necessarily a terrible thing. Some people may need that energy in their life. So it's not going to last very long, though. The retrograde of Mars is coming. And surely that can express itself in a number of ways out there in the social or political realm. So let me take a sip of coffee here, and then we will continue. I'm not going to subject you necessarily to the sound of it, so just hang tight. Okay, so speaking of Mars, opposite Pluto in this T square, this cardinal T square. So, what is the cardinal T square? Well, as you can see, the bold red lines are a T square. And there is a ghost point, right? There is a point that is not represented but would complete the grand square. And of course, in astrology, when you have a grand square, it is a box you cannot get out of. And the only way out is through. And it's very frustrating. People feel trapped. People feel like they're running in circles. And the real um, trick to a grand square is to lean into all of it, right? And no, again, the only way out is through, and you have to kind of spin the square, so to speak, so that you don't get caught in all of the angles, right? But it does feel like a trap in a lot of ways, and sometimes all the energy, well, a lot of times the energy will all kind of, as it looks, will point towards whatever um, is the square point from the opposition, which is Mars and Pluto. And we'll get there because this is really important to pay attention to as we are coming up on the presidential election in the United States. And I don't really want to put any energy into any forecasting or predicting about that because if we're going to be using astrology, especially Western and tropical astrology, it's meant for personal development and using it as a tool for our own growth and development in this incarnation, right? And so I don't want to get too caught up in those aspects at this point, right? I've really just stopped paying attention. I mean, it's again, I'm observing. It comes across my screen, figuratively and literally, but I don't really engage much of it anymore because it just seems like it keeps pulling me away from my own soul's work. And I think that's, if you're following astrology, that's really the best use of it, as opposed to getting caught up in making predictions. It's good to understand what the potentials are, right? I mean, that's why you get a personal reading or you understand your own chart so that you can have a temporal map of what to expect. But, I don't want to get caught up too much. But I will say that having this Mars opposite Pluto is going to affect a lot of people and how they respond and react to how things transpire over the next week and certainly the next 2 weeks. Because when we get to our full moon in Taurus on the 15th of November, it will be conjunct Uranus. Okay, so that's something that's really important to consider. And Saturn is going to station direct on the same day. So we'll get there. There's some good transits with Saturn over the next 2 weeks. So when we talk about Mars being opposite Pluto, which I said is going to be exact on the 3rd, it gives a lot of intense and passionate desire. Now, we're talking about the last degrees of Cancer and Capricorn. So you're talking about more, cardinal energy, which has momentum behind it. There's movement behind it. And it does give that intense, passionate desire, but there's a lot of tension and there's a lot of difficulty in achieving them, right? There's a conflict here. Obviously, we're talking about an opposition, right? We're talking about tension. There's a conflict between your desires and your actions, right? And Pluto is deep desire. Mars, you act on your own personal desire, but Pluto is about the soul and the soul's desire and something deeper than just the personality. And of course, if you have gotten, if you're familiar with your draconic chart or you've gotten the galactic oversoul reading from me in particular, then you know that the soul's chart and the natal chart are different things. And the soul and the personality are not exact, or they're not the same thing. And so with Mars, you're talking about the individual personality, the I am that comes along with coming into life and incarnation, right? The seed. Pluto is about the entire experience of death, destruction, rebirth, right? Birth, death, rebirth, right? The cycle, and has so much more to do with the soul's journey as opposed, and that's part of evolutionary astrology, is the soul's journey. So there's already this tension, especially with Mars in this last degree of Cancer. My gosh, right? Talk about wanting to preserve and conserve that which where you feel you belong, right? That which you feel roots and grounds you, Cancer is about the home and family, and it's about our emotional ties to those things, right? So there is a conflict that's creating incredible inner tension with this opposition, right? And you become extremely competitive, right? As you strive to reach your full potential, you want to prove your past efforts. These are all good things. The thing to watch out for is that yes, can activate really powerful energies that can lead to people to be domineering, that can be controlling, they can be ruthless. We can be these things, right? There's a sense of danger or separation, which again can very much come out of the political landscape over the next week. And it can really trigger the release of adrenaline, fight or flight, well, fight, flight, or freeze. Now, there's a way to channel this energy, right? There's a lot of achievement that's possible if you can channel this energy, because it's very primal, right? And transform them into something creative, something physical, something tangible. And if you're determined to complete something that you thought, that you started a year ago, perhaps, right? There's a lot of potential here for this, right? But your actions can make other people feel threatened or intimidated. And there's a lot of resistance from people who are very powerful that don't want you or others to succeed. And they will seek out your weak spots, and do what they can to attack what you're doing. Trying to rule brings the danger of violence and ruin, especially if you use these tactics that are ruthless or subversive. So just keep in mind that as much as we can harness this energy and use it for good, other people are harnessing it for their own desires, and because of fear, right? Because of that adrenaline, because of feeling intimidated, and they will act out in very ruthless ways. Choose your battles carefully. Oh, I cannot express enough how important this is. And that's why this T-square, as it comes back around, this T-square yesterday is really important, because the last degree of Libra is like you just have a holistic sense of all of it, right? This holistic sense of knowledge about the whole situation, whatever it is, right? Libra is, again, cardinal air. So the intellect and the mind is put towards balance and equilibrium and fairness and the contract being balanced, whatever that relational contract is. And eventually you get to a point where you understand the whole picture, right? It's not just one or the other. You see the whole thing for what it is. And emotionally, that I think was very difficult with this Pluto Mars opposition that is really triggering us to get somewhere, to accomplish something, to fulfill something that is about our power, right? Cancer and Capricorn, 4th and 10th house is about our power. It's about our personal power in Cancer in the 4th house, and the 10th house in Capricorn is about our professional power, the release of our power. And with Capricorn sitting, or Pluto sitting at this last degree of Capricorn, is about institutional power and the power of the soul, trumping, and just don't get too caught up in those words, trumping or superseding even the institutional power that Capricorn can often represent, right? That the bones of the system, the scaffolding, the structure of the material form, right? The matrix, but also too divine law, right? And natural law. And we come into life, we come into incarnation, we interact with nature. It has all of the, you don't bypass natural law. As much as there are those who have attempted and will continue to attempt, the power of the soul is so much more. Anyway, this T-square, this cardinal T-square that was yesterday, I encourage you, if you're still kind of, especially because I can feel the reverberation still, what's the ghost point, right? What are we missing in order to understand again the full picture? Because emotionally we do. We have this sense of like, okay, I see the whole picture, and I think that that has been very difficult with this Mars Pluto opposition that is just like, I got to do something. So, what's the ghost point? Well, it's the last degrees of Aries, right? Very close to where the full moon was. So, ooh, I'm getting a big one on that. Um, Go back to that full moon. What was happening? What was coming out? Like, what possibilities were being revealed to you about your own creative potential and where it could go? Because that is a piece that's missing out of this grand square. We're just getting the T square. So that ghost point is important. The other thing about that is that it's in conjunction with the Andromeda galaxy, or called vertex in astrology as well. And for those of you who've had the galactic reading and you know about the Andromeda galaxy in particular, or the starseed reading, you know that this placement, that those who have this prominent in their charts, there is a focus always on freedom to be unadulterated self at any given moment. And there's, sovereignty, freedom, the ability to move freely is very important to Andromedan people. People have strong Andromeda markings in their chart. They don't put up with emotional manipulation or guilt tripping, right? Their emotional boundaries are very strong because they know who they are, right? Which makes it difficult to maintain commitments sometimes. And with all this cardinal energy and this cardinal T square and this ghost point in the last degree of Aries, I would encourage you, as I'm encouraging myself, to realize that we can find some sense of balance by attuning ourselves to the cosmic rhythm, right? Because our power at an individual level is really no match for the soul's power of Pluto, especially at these institutional levels. And as much as we personally want to maintain what it is that we feel grounds us and stabilizes us emotionally, it's going to be when Mars is retrograde coming back over these positions that we're really going to do some inner work around these things. But in the meantime, right, attuning ourselves to the cosmic and universal rhythms, realizing that there is a boundary to that creative potential if we want to substantiate it, right? You have to eventually plant the seed and it has to actually germinate, right? That means the ego has to let go. The shell of the seed must let go in order for germination and creative potential to be actualized. And so, as much as we emotionally can behold the big picture, I think that in order to balance ourselves out, if we haven't already, it's going to be very important that we find that place within ourselves where we are not necessarily tuned into the institutional framework necessarily, or even just our own root system, but go back really to the spark of life, right? To the divine spark that's within each of us and within the whole cosmos. And I do feel like that could help in terms of, or allow us to find our way through what otherwise feels like a very limiting and trapped situation. So this Mars opposite Pluto, again, choose your battles carefully. You may realize your efforts will not succeed now. There's nothing wrong with that when you choose your battles carefully. Use your energy wisely in this situation. Transform your goals to remove the heat, right? If you have to fight, try enlisting the help of other motivated people, right? Maintaining a high moral standard will increase the likelihood of success, okay? So that's going to be exact on the 3rd, but it's, as you can see, it is already building. So let's start looking here at our new moon and what it represents, okay? So the new moon in Scorpio, as of, like I said, this morning, November 1st, as you can see here, Friday, November 1st, and it's actually 9 to 10 degrees. I'm not going to move it back. So 9 to 10 degrees of Scorpio. And it's an interesting degree, and I'm curious to see how this all unfolds over the next month, right? So the degree, Sabian symbol wise, is a fellowship supper reunites old comrades, and it represents the importance of establishing or strengthening the links with those whom one has shared living experiences. There's a sense of comradeship. And I really do feel like that as difficult and tumultuous relationships have been over the weeks and months and certainly years, this is establishing an opportunity for all of us to build on those relationships of shared experience, whatever they are, right? Strengthening those links, maybe establishing new ones. That seems also very important, right? It's about the overtones of human relationship based on a community of work or experiences, right? Because Scorpio is about the shared resources. It is about the shared energy. Everybody's throwing in what they have and generating something more than what they came in with. So yes, there is a darkness that goes along with Scorpio because this is where power dynamics come into play. And that's also part of this as well. But the intention, the seed point here of this next month of November is about establishing new links or strengthening the ones that already exist. And it seems to me that when we're going to talk about power dynamics, we're going to talk about power in general with Mars and Pluto in its opposition like this. This focus over the next 4 weeks or so of this new moon seems really important. We're going to need each other. And that's the wonderful part about Scorpio, the intensity of Scorpio when there's real intimacy and trust. I mean, it is endless the depth you can go with a person or with people when there is intimacy and trust. And sometimes that can be very scary, right? You're talking about still waters that run deep. So you actually still have to behold the reflection of who you actually are in your relationship. It's so difficult. It's very easy to consistently outsource all of our problems to other people. And yes, there are situations where that is absolutely appropriate, and you make change based on that, and not identify with your victimhood necessarily, but you're like, okay, I see now accurately like what is going on here, and these are the relationships I want to establish. Maybe this is about establishing relationships with new people. Maybe it's about reestablishing the nature of a relationship that is just not doing so well for any reason, right? So it's all about the energy and the power dynamics in relationships and trust and intimacy and what we can actually accomplish together, like what we can generate together. And this new moon, I think, is very hopeful. It's, but when we are attempting with Mars in this last degree of Cancer to conserve, it gets very insular in these last degrees of Cancer, very insular and very protective. And Pluto's just like, I'm destroying it all. It's all being destroyed, right? And part of that, I feel like personally with this Saturn retrograde is part of that too, is like a new mold is being developed. And when Saturn stations direct on the 15th along with the full moon in Taurus, I do feel like that it's like we're going to pour concrete in a brand new mold, and be prepared for that. So in this time period, I think we are really being invited to identify what it is we do want to preserve. And like I said, when Mars comes retrograde back over this point, there will be some inner work that we're going to be doing in this area. And in the meantime, setting the intention, right, to strengthen, to establish those links, to strengthen the links that already exist, right, of those that we trust, the people who we've been intimate with in a variety of ways that's actually benefiting us, right? Whether it's business, whether it's personal, whether it's spiritual, it doesn't matter. And I can, I'm sure many of us have multiple relationships along these different lines that this is relating to. So this is, it's just with again, Mars and Pluto, they both rule Scorpio. There's a lot of power dynamic issues coming up. And if you want to remind yourself about, well, what is a Mars opposite Pluto transit like? You can look it up on the internet, right? You just type in Mars opposite Pluto transit and you'll get so much stuff. I personally use Astrology King when I talk about the current transits because there's a lot of good write-ups there. If you're looking at your own chart, there are other websites, but power dynamics are big. And when you feel disempowered, especially with Mars like this, and trying to really protect that which you belong to, and what, like I said, what allows you to feel a sense of belonging and a sense of cohesion and grounding, it can be really, you can you can really act out when Pluto's like, I'm just taking it all down, down to the roots, right? So maybe that's what needs to happen in some cases. That doesn't mean that you don't stay focused on what has been working or reestablishing a different way of being in a certain relationship. How you do business is a big part of Scorpio. And of course, that Taurus-Scorpio axis of the second, eighth house is about resource. So this could very well have to do with business resources or just how you make money, right? Your resources and how you generate wealth. That's a big Scorpio thing as well. So maybe there's going to be a new way of doing that in your life that is going to come out of this whole lunar cycle. So let's start moving forward because I'm running out of time. One thing I will say, though, is that Mercury is... there may not be a part 2, Scorpio. I'm sorry, because I have a time limit right here, and if I want to get this out on time, I'm not sure there will be a part 2. So I'm really sorry about that now that I'm looking at the time period here. Actually, no. We'll just go through the transits, and this will be for all signs. And I'm just gonna apologize for speaking too soon about what my intentions were because it's just not gonna happen. So that's okay, Scorpio. Chances are you already know. Yeah, you already know your own chart, and you've been paying attention. So the other thing that's going to be happening today, which, speaking of Saturn, is that the moon is going to trine Saturn. And this is going to be a bit of an emotional preview for when the sun is in a trine to Saturn over this next 2 weeks. And so, of course, a moon trine Saturn gives self-reliance and practicality and persistence. And you can draw on patience and emotional strength to handle sensitive or complex relationship issues. So I just feel like that this is the theme here in general, and then this trine to Saturn is going to really give that emotional strength and that practicality and self-reliance, right? So you may need to seek advice from an elder. You may need to make important decisions about your home or your family or your relationships. Memories and dreams. This is a big part of the Saturn energy as well, coming into the moon. Memories and dreams might give you some insight on how to move forward. But this moon trine Saturn, I think, is very important along with this new moon today to give that persistence and that self-reliance emotionally to handle whatever is coming up, okay? And sometimes the real power of Scorpio, especially if you're going to talk about 13, it doesn't get more Scorpio than 13 degrees of Scorpio, is the ability to relate seemingly unrelated things, right? That you come into a new awareness by going deeper into a situation or, being willing to have some divergent thinking, right? I mean, instead of just staying in the same rut you've been in, perhaps consider something from a different vantage point. Maybe look at things or be willing to feel things from a different position. And the moon trine Saturn, I think, will allow for an emotional kind of stability in order to do that. And I think that's very beneficial. Now, speaking of Scorpio and Mars, you also see that Mercury and Mars are going to be coming into a trine on Saturday, which is the 2nd. So if we go forward, There's a lot of bold lines in the transiting astrology, especially if you're looking at Western tropical astrology. So Mercury is going to trine Mars, and that gives you tremendous mental energy, especially because Mercury is in one of Mars's home territories here. Quick thinking, ingenuity, decisiveness, right? It's really good for making plans. I do feel like that their Mercury at the very last degree of Scorpio is kind of a relief from tension. It's like a release valve at this last degree here. And their sharp senses, resourcefulness, a sense of adventure gives you confidence to take what? Calculated risks, right? So we might be afraid of making change. We might be afraid or have some trepidation, I guess, in terms of what we feel like we may be losing, right? This transit gives you focus, concentration, and confidence in your thoughts and your plans, right? And you can be honest, straightforward in terms of your communication. It's really good for sharing your thoughts, especially things you would normally keep to yourself because you don't want to rock the boat, you don't want to upset people. You know that it could be very disruptive to your relationships. This type of transit is going to be that release valve mentally and communication wise. Yes, it can be forceful, but it also can be very exact in terms of the nature of your thinking and communication. So you may need to defend yourself or a loved one, for instance, or an issue you care about. So there's a lot of confidence that comes along with this. So don't lose hope here. Along with this, as you can see, is that Mercury will sextile Pluto. So is also at the same time having a relationship with the other Scorpio ruler while it's in the last degree of Scorpio. Mercury, I mean. Adds depth and intensity to your thinking and conversation. It's very powerful intellect, strong intuition. Again, there's a lot of persuasive qualities with Mercury in this last degree of Scorpio, making these connections to Mars and Pluto, right? So you can really make your case with people and you can sell a message. You can convince others of ideas that they usually are fearful of or wary of. And I know that this has probably been the case for many of us for years now, attempting to communicate with people about what we're learning, what we have found to be true, and others just not there yet, right? Everybody's in their own place. And it's not up to us necessarily, and this is important, it's not up to us to force people into the same place we are spiritually, right? It is up to us to love everyone unconditionally as best we can as the same child of God that we are, right? But this particular transit is really going to assist in bridging some of those gaps. What? Strengthening the relationships, establishing new links. Okay, so this is really helpful. But don't abuse this power, right? You can easily convince something or persuade someone of something so you can get what you want out of the situation. And again, this Mars and Cancer thing, I think, is part of that as well. And you can be very driven and dominating. So you just got to be careful. Don't abuse that if that's the case. And of course, the moon's going to, pretty much meet Mercury before it moves into Sagittarius. And so that also makes it very easy to sometimes it can be difficult when Moon and Mercury come together, so it can be hard to tease out what is your mind and what are your emotions, especially in the last degree of Scorpio. But in this case, I think that's going to be a good thing of like kind of they'll meld together. And so whatever it is you got to say, whatever it is you need to communicate, whatever type of conversation you may need to have, these transits are going to be very supportive of that situation. And then Mercury moves into Sag. You know what I mean? It's good that this is all happening before that because Mercury will get very weak in Sagittarius. Mercury doesn't want to synthesize ideas into understanding and wisdom. It wants to keep playing in the playground of the mind. So that's something to consider. Now, we talked about Mars opposite Pluto on the 3rd, but we also have Venus opposite Jupiter on the 3rd as well. So you can see that we're still, and so we have these two oppositions, right? Venus opposite Jupiter, and Venus is in Sag, right? Is in the sign that Jupiter is the ruler of. And so, yes, the Mars opposite Pluto is incredibly powerful. This transit kind of takes the edge off in some ways. And normally it would be like if you have normally Venus opposite Jupiter will kind of like strip away all your self-discipline and motivation because you want to indulge yourself, you want to party, you want to just like be with people. You don't want to work, that's for sure. You want to relax, you want to enjoy life to the fullest, you want to make friends, right? You want to be with the people you care about, right? So in some ways, normally you'd have to really dig deep to find the drive and ambition. Well, you won't have to do that with Mars opposite Pluto. In fact, this type of transit, especially with Jupiter in its retrograde, is, I think, going to take the edge off and allow us to relax a little bit, right? To maybe kind of quell some of the emotional outbursting that could be that Jupiter at this position in Gemini has been, even if it's been internal. So yes, there's a tendency to be sloppy about details and lazy when Venus is opposite Jupiter like this. But it's very playful. And I think that this is a great, I think personally, this is a nice addendum and a great way to take the edge off of the Mars opposite Pluto energy that is so intense and so dominating and domineering. This Venus opposite Jupiter is much more relaxed, and it's much more of like, I just want to enjoy life. Maybe instead of, being caught up in the upheaval of things being out of balance and attempting to do something about it, maybe we can step back a little bit with Venus and Sagittarius and just kind of play, be a little bit more playful, right? It's kind of like not fake it till you make it, but just try a different way. Maybe you got to put on a different set of glasses, kind of like the blue blockers I have on, but put on a different set of glasses. Perhaps you need to imagine yourself a little bit in a different role in your relationships, and certainly what is meaningful to you in terms of those relationships, in order to take the edge off and relax, right? So I think that come Sunday, and of course Venus is gonna, you can see here, is in a trine to Chiron as well. And it's not to say that we shouldn't come out the gate swinging if we need to, but sometimes we don't always need to do that. And I do feel like there's like a soothing element to Venus trining Chiron, even if they are in fire signs. Like it's just more about giving a direction to all of our creative energy, if that makes sense. That's less like intense. It's not like, a boxer enters the ring. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that. Some people, I think, need to, acknowledge that wound within themselves, that they have no confidence. They don't have any sense of self-worth as is. And so they don't feel like they can come into the ring and really hold their own, right? This Venus trine Chiron is going to be like, yeah, okay, so why don't you practice? Why don't you put on the uniform, so to speak? Maybe you need to just act as if you are confident just for a little while so that you get a sense of what it feels like. And then you might find yourself like, oh, I actually am confident. I didn't, all I had to do is kind of play make believe for a little while. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is what it actually feels like. So Sunday, yes, again, there's a lot of intensity, but there's also quite a bit of opportunity to just take a step back and relax, right? Enjoy life. And know that the motivation to do something really important and powerful is already built into the astrology with Mars opposite Pluto, okay? Now, Sun trine Saturn, again, this is coming into Monday the 4th. Remember, we just had the moon today in a trine to Saturn, so by the time we get to Monday, it's much more on the surface, much more outwardly expressed with the sun in Scorpio. And of course, when you have a Sun trine Saturn, stability, balance, structure, routine, reliability, right? It reduces tension, removes obstacles to progress. So there's a lot of this in the chart. It's just a matter of harnessing it appropriately and not letting it run away with us, as Mars in Cancer is desperate almost to hold on to everything that has been developed so far, and that core within ourselves. So it allows you to focus on achieving and accumulating things, reinforcing the foundations of your life. And again, it's about putting together, looking, being divergent in your thinking, a willingness to put together seemingly unrelated facts. It's like being in a lab and doing an experiment. So it's perfect for setting long-term goals here with Sun trine Saturn that are substantial and ambitious, but very realistic, right? That's the thing. You're not just like going down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and making connections that have nothing to do with what you're doing, right? And a lot of us have done that. A lot of this, and a lot of people are still doing that. That has nothing to do with their life, has nothing to do with the day to day, and they just keep pouring down these rabbit holes. And that's the downside of something like this. It will reinforce that too. Reaching your goals is very easy with Sun trine Saturn because we're determined, we're persistent, we have self-discipline, a sense of responsibility, and relationships can be very serious and practical, and they can benefit from this increased understanding, this dedication, respect, loyalty. It's a really good time to formalize a partnership, absolutely. And a significant new long-term relationship may involve work. It may involve a significant age difference, right? Who knows, like a mentor type of situation. Either way, it increases your confidence, self-respect, and self-understanding, right? It's ideal for teaching and instructing and passing on your knowledge, right? So this is great. Now remember that Saturn is still retrograde, so we're still kind of reshaping some sort of like mold here, but this is allowing it to happen in a way maybe that we haven't seen before, right? And again, that confidence that comes along with the Sun trine Saturn is really important. Of course, we have Super Tuesday on the 5th of November. This is exactly when Mars comes into Leo. Okay, and of course, Leo, 0 degrees Leo, right, is the blood rushing to the head, right? It's the Kundalini awakening spontaneously. So, of course, that's going to have all its own issues. Now, our first quarter moon is going to be on the 9th, and so we're going to go look at that. So the moon will be in Aquarius, and it's going to square, we'll go back and look at it, square our Scorpio sun. And I will say that this particular transit is likely going, what's a first quarter square? What do I do? What do I do? And I think that this will be a moment of like, having an emotional sense of like what is being revealed, right? Motivations being unmasked. And the sun in Scorpio is kind of this culmination, right? A consummation, that it's like walking through, and like right now, like I'm looking at all of out the window into my property, and we have this beautiful large, the biggest I've ever seen actually, large Japanese maple on our property, and it's all brown and golden and orange leaves, right? And they're all falling off, and all the trees around are just beautiful, but it also represents things coming full circle, coming to an end. And as with all squares, especially a quarter square with the sun and the moon, what do? A crisis in action, right? Because we're going to have an emotional sense. It's going to be reflected off of us in many ways, like the motives, either personally or with people in relationship, being unmasked. And, it's not an either or with a square. You just lean into where it's uncomfortable and know that you're going to grow. And I think that what we're going to find here is that post-election, basically, whatever transpires, there is a revelation of the hidden motives, right? That you can't keep everything a secret. Although it's Scorpio, there's Scorpio is all about secrets. I think it's really going to test our ability to lean into the discomfort of letting something go and knowing something has come full circle, while also emotionally having to contend with like the truth, right? The hidden motivations being revealed, the unmasking of 18 degrees Aquarius. So I think that's going to, and this, again, that's on the 9th of, that's next weekend, right? The 9th is the following Saturday. And as you can see here, Venus is coming into conjunction with the galactic center, right? So 27, 28 degrees Sagittarius in a square to Neptune, insecurity about yourself. And specifically, again, there are this degree, 28 degrees of Sagittarius is an old bridge over a beautiful stream that's still in use. And, Neptune and Pisces, Neptune is the great dissolver, and especially in Pisces, there really is only source with Neptune and Pisces. There's only the ether, right? There's only the Akashic records. Everything is dissolved back into that space all the time with Neptune and Pisces. So even this old bridge over a beautiful stream that has been in use for ages and generations, and it's still very much functional and useful. I think we're really going to be like, okay, well, what do we keep here? Like, what is it that we hold on to, and what is it that we have to let go of? And I think Venus square Neptune can make us feel very insecure about ourselves, and distortions about our own image. And it's important that you realize that there are distortions. Again, Neptune and Pisces just kind of is the smoke and mirrors, right? It's the film. Now again, it's retrograde, so it's you're seeing all the props and the set and the film, like you're aware that you're watching a movie. You can also experience disappointment, right? And I think because there are aspects we really want to hold on to that we have been using, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with those things, but there's a tendency to over idealize things when Venus in a square to Neptune, and especially because we're like, this bridge has been standing, we've used it for generations, like it's still beautiful and it's still functioning, it's still there's no and we're still using it, right? The square to Neptune, I just caution you that we tend to over idealize our interests, especially romantic, but I would say just purpose and meaning when we're talking about Sagittarius. So situations leave us all susceptible to disappointment, being taken advantage of, being a doormat. It's very easy to deal with these things if you're in a healthy relationship. It really will just be like, okay, again, what needs to change? Just because this bridge is here and I've used it this whole time doesn't mean that my needs will not be met by source. If there needs to be a change, if we have to make a diversion, maybe we have to knock down the bridge, right? Maybe we take a different route to get where we're going. Relationships that are not stable or healthy are going to be really problematic, and trust is going to be a big issue here. And again, the insecurity, the disappointment, and it does heighten our need for like more tenderness and affection, but again, it gets very confusing with the Neptunian influence. Although again, with the retrograde, we are given the opportunity to be like, we were watching a movie here, and we see, like I said, the screen, we see the props, we see the stage. It would be wiser to wait until after this transit before committing yourself or being too trusting. And I think that's going to be difficult considering the nature of this new moon that is tasking us with establishing or strengthening links with comradeship of some sort. And I'm not talking about communism. Poor self-esteem, lack of self-discipline make this the wrong time for dieting and partying. That's from Astrology King. You're just more susceptible to depression and depressive influences, so staying away from things like alcohol and opiates and things that depress your nervous system. I mean, all substances, really. Regular users should be aware of overdose infection in general. And overdose, and then in terms of like health and wellness, infection is also the things that you've done that have worked in the past may not work this time. So on the 11th, which is Veterans Day, we have the Sun quincunx Jupiter, which is what? That's the following Monday. We're almost there, guys. Almost there. This quincunx with the Sun and Jupiter is, again, there's a yearning to reach your goals. So now we're coming back around. There's going to be a lot of this just vacillating here in terms of what we're really motivated to achieve. And so Sun, quincunx, and in conjunct, right? These two things that don't seem to fit together. There's a yearning to reach your goals. And with the Sun and Scorpio, it really is like we're going to plunge ahead into the unknown here. And now if you're on the right path, this quincunx, even though it will feel imbalanced, there's sometimes there's some good luck, right? And with the retrograde of Jupiter, I think it's more of an inner sense of luck, right? But any imbalance between what you want and what you need is going to become much more evident, right? Again, dissatisfaction, disappointment, insecurity, uncertainty, you know, don't shy away from these experiences. That's what I'm going to say, because they indicate that it's time to reassess your goals, right? If you continue on the wrong path, there will be a crisis of identity or self-esteem. The universe will do it for you because your soul is here to learn lessons and to grow and evolve at that level. So if your personality continues to avoid, the soul will, you're going to get to the same place regardless. So there may be a crisis if you're not willing to reassess your goals. Perhaps success has eluded you because you've taken on too many projects. I can relate to that. I tend to do that quite a bit. So I have to get ready to leave here soon, my friends. So perhaps success has eluded you. Deciding on only a single goal will make life much easier if you've been obsessed with winning, right? So consolidate, focus in to what it is that you really want. But this transit can really increase your anxiety and tension. And it's a turning point. It's truly a turning point for anything that is unhealthy, immoral, and destructive especially in terms of relationships and what we've been thinking about ourselves and relationships. Now, the last really big transit I want to bring up is that Mercury is going to square Saturn on the next day, which is the 12th. So it's more challenging issues coming about, right? So it favors hard mental work when you have Mercury square Saturn. Here's the thing, retribution. A widow's past is brought to light. So it favors hard mental work when you have Mercury square Saturn, but it's best to do it alone, right? Take your time when making important decisions. So a lot of what I'm feeling at this whole 2 weeks and this new moon really is that we just feel this drive so much. And there's going to be so many points along the way that are going to really give us an opportunity to really assess what those goals are, what we're driven to do, and to make changes, and to acknowledge that the relationships are what's really important. So this Mercury square Saturn, it can be distance or separation in close relationships, gloomy thoughts, bad news, loneliness, right? Try to remember that a transit like this, Mercury square Saturn, can easily bring out the worst in every matter, especially the degree of Sag, 13 degrees Sagittarius. A widow's past is brought to light, right? That even though something has changed, does not mean that the karma of those past actions aren't going to overshadow. And there's something really important about that. You can't just move on and not mentally acknowledge the karma of what's already happened and is still looming. So take your time. Don't rely on the words of others. Be careful with your own words. You'll likely say the wrong thing and dig a deeper hole. If you're feeling down during this transit, now this is the 12th, right? So what day is that? That's going to be Tuesday the 12th. Just know that it's maybe take that energy and really work on yourself in that moment, okay? Because then we get to the 15th, and we'll talk way more about that when we get to that particular forecast. Now, Venus is going to come into Capricorn and talk about it's time to, the maturity in terms of relationship is going to, it's going to mature, right? It's like a grandmother energy when Venus, it's very wise elder women when Venus comes into Capricorn. But the thing I want to really bring up is not only will the moon be conjunct Uranus at the full moon, but Saturn's going to station. So just be aware and be prepared for emotional upheaval and a sense of change and impending change with this full moon conjunct Uranus and Saturn stationing direct, right? That the die is cast And we're going to start pouring a new mold. And it may be a little freaky, and can be upending, right? So I would just encourage you to take these 2 weeks to really evaluate and assess the relationships you're in, what they're doing for you, what you're bringing to the table, what they're creating, and see what you can do to, you know, establish and strengthen the links that are really in alignment with your what you really want, and not just you as a personality, but at a soul level. And that does require that we have to let some things go. Okay. And I mean, that's not that hard. And people say that all the time. And it's almost to the point where you just let it go in one ear and out the other, because it's easy to say those words. And it's very difficult to actually live them and do the hard work. But this is the time to do it. And the cosmic map, and the sacred geometry of all of this is really supporting us if we choose to accept and to do the hard things, right? So, my friends, thank you for being here. Scorpio, I apologize for setting you up thinking I was going to give you your horoscope, but I think you have plenty to work on. And just know that everything I've talked about with the scorpionic energy and with Mars and Pluto, it's all directly related to you as an individual, regardless if your sun, rising, or moon in Scorpio. It's going to be very personal. It's going to be very related to your identity and who you are in the world. So just take all of that and apply that to your subjective self, or how you express yourself, and I think you'll be okay. So, my friends, thank you for being here. I truly appreciate all of you so very much. I'll see you on the full moon on the 15th. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.